I woke up from a 6-month coma to find tiki torches on my private dock. Let me repeat that tiki torches. A woman in a sequin visor was doing the Macarena on what used to be my boat ramp, while 2 toddlers chased each other past an inflatable flamingo the size of a small car. The sound of a margarita blender screamed like a jet engine across what was supposed to be my peaceful lake. A massive banner stretched between 2 palm trees that definitely weren't there before proclaimed Lake Harrison Annual Luau, sponsored by the HOA. I sat there in my wheelchair, fresh from the hospital with my discharge papers still in my lap, wondering if maybe I was still in a coma. My name is David Riverside, and 6 months ago, I owned a private lake. The deed said so, the property survey said so. The no trespassing signs I'd posted every 20 feet around the perimeter said so. But apparently, while I was unconscious in Mercy General Hospital, our HOA president, Patricia Golding, decided that legal documents were more like suggestions than actual binding contracts. Let me back up and explain how a simple allergic reaction to pine nuts at a farmer's market led to the most insane property dispute in the history of suburban America. I moved to Peaceful Valley specifically because it lived up to its name. No late-night parties, no constant lawnmower symphonies at dawn, no neighbors asking intrusive questions about my work as a rare book appraiser. The community had an HOA, sure, but they mostly just made sure people didn't paint their houses neon pink or leave Christmas decorations up until Easter. Patricia Golding had been president for 3 years when my incident happened, and she'd always struck me as the type who color-coded her sock drawer and measured grass height with an actual ruler. The day everything went sideways started normally enough. I'd gone to the Saturday farmers market downtown, grabbed a sample of what I thought was regular pesto, and within minutes, my throat started closing up. The EMTs said I was lucky someone called 911 so fast. What they didn't mention was that while they were loading me into the ambulance, Patricia was already eyeing my lakefront property like a lion stalking a wounded gazelle, according to my neighbor Tom, who filled me in later. She actually smiled as the ambulance pulled away. By week 2 of my coma, Patricia had called an emergency HOA meeting. She stood at the podium in the community center and declared with straight face that since I was incapacitated and couldn't maintain my property to HOA standards, the association had the right to step in and make improvements. When Tom pointed out that my property was perfectly maintained by the landscaping service I prepaid for the year, Patricia waved him off and said she was talking about maximizing the property's potential for community enrichment. Month 1 saw the installation of the first gazebo. Patricia called it a meditation pavilion for residents seeking waterfront tranquility, though apparently her definition of tranquility included wine tastings every Tuesday and Thursday. She had a contractor buddy named Rick who owed her a favor, so labor was cheap and permits were mysteriously fast-tracked through her cousin at the county office. The gazebo went up in 3 days, complete with HOA-branded cushions and a suggestion box for future improvements. Month 2 brought the beach. Not a natural beach, mind you, but 3 dump trucks worth of sand spread across my lawn, leading down to the water. Patricia sent out a newsletter to all residents announcing the grand opening of Peaceful Valley Community Beach, complete with professional photos of children building sandcastles on my property. She even had the audacity to quote me in the newsletter, claiming I had given verbal consent for the improvements. When pressed about how an unconscious person gives verbal consent, she said I had mumbled something that sounded like yes during a coma dream. By month 3, things had escalated beyond recognition. A second gazebo appeared, this one dubbed the Sunset Pavilion, strategically placed on my dock with built-in speakers for ambient music. Patricia installed a volleyball net in the shallow water, designated swimming lanes with floating rope barriers, and even brought in a food truck every weekend that parked on my driveway. The margarita bar on my back porch was a final insult, complete with a cash register and tip jar labeled HOA Beverage Fund. Month 4 saw the introduction of scheduled events: water aerobics at dawn, paddleboard yoga at noon, and something called splash meditation at sunset. Patricia had business cards printed listing herself as Director of Waterfront Activities and started charging non-HOA residents a day pass fee to access what she now called Harrison Community Lake. She was making money off my property while I lay unconscious in a hospital bed. The 5th month brought permanent structures, a bathroom facility that Patricia insisted was just a temporary portable unit. Despite having a concrete foundation, a boat rental kiosk run by her nephew, even a small stage for live music that she claimed was essential for community morale. She held a fundraiser concert and raised $12,000 for future lake improvements, none of which would ever make it to my bank account. Month 6 was when things started falling apart for Patricia, though she didn't know it yet. My security system, which had been offline due to a convenient power outage during the initial construction, finally came back online when her foam party machine shorted out the electrical panel. The backup generator kicked in, and suddenly 6 months of footage uploaded to the cloud. Crystal clear night vision video of Patricia breaking into my mailbox, spray painting over my private property signs, and at one point try on my kayak like it was a hat while clearly intoxicated. I discovered all of this on my first day home from the hospital, when I was supposed to be recovering quietly. Instead, I was watching a conga line of strangers parade to my backyard, while Patricia stood on my dock with a megaphone announcing the day's activities. The rage I felt could have powered a small city. But I didn't yell or make a scene. I simply pulled out my phone and called my attorney, who happened to be my former college roommate and an absolute shark when it came to property law. Marcus Washington arrived within an hour, took one look at the scene, and actually laughed. Not a good sign for Patricia. He started taking photos, making notes, and interviewing witnesses. Tom was more than happy to provide a detailed timeline of everything that had happened, complete with copies of HOA meeting minutes where Patricia had claimed emergency authority to improve abandoned property. The word abandoned was particularly interesting since I'd been in a coma, not dead, and my mortgage and property taxes were all on autopay. The cease and desist letter was hand-delivered to Patricia during her Tuesday wine tasting in my gazebo. She read it, laughed, and told Marcus that possession was 9/10 of the law. Marcus smiled and informed her that criminal trespass, fraud, and destruction of property were 10/10 illegal. He also mentioned that the county assessor would be very interested to know about the unpermitted structures and the commercial enterprise she was running on residentially zoned property. Within 48 hours, code enforcement arrived. They were not amused. The gazebos violated setback requirements. The bathroom facility had no proper septic connection. The beach violated environmental regulations about introducing foreign materials to natural water bodies. The food truck violated health department rules. Even the tiki torches were a fire code violation. Patricia tried to argue that the HOA had authority, but the inspector just pointed to my deed and asked if she could read the words private property. The emergency HOA meeting was called for that Friday. Patricia showed up with a binder of what she called community testimonials about how the lake improvements had enhanced property values and resident satisfaction. She had graphs and charts showing increased neighborhood harmony, and even a petition with 200 signatures asking to keep the beach. What she didn't have was any legal ground to stand on. And when Marcus presented the surveillance footage of her various crimes, the room went silent. The criminal charges were just the beginning. Mail tampering was a federal offense. Fraud for claiming she had my consent while I was unconscious. Destruction of property for the spray painting. Theft for the money she'd collected using my property. The district attorney was particularly interested in the embezzlement angle when they discovered Patricia had been skimming from the beverage fund to pay for her own mortgage. The forensic accountant found over $30,000 in misappropriated funds. The civil lawsuit was even worse for Patricia. Marcus calculated damages for 6 months of unauthorized use, lost property value due to unpermitted structures, emotional distress, and restoration costs. The total came to $400,000, not including legal fees. Patricia's face went from red to white to a shade of green I'd never seen on human skin before. She tried to argue that she'd improved the property, but the judge pointed out that improvements require owner consent. The HOA board voted her out unanimously. Even her usual supporters couldn't defend federal crimes. Her real estate license was suspended pending investigation. Her husband filed for divorce when the extent of the financial crimes came to light. But the final blow came when the judge announced the criminal sentence. 3 years probation, 500 hours of community service specifically focused on respecting property rights, and, most poetically, a restraining order keeping her 500 feet from any body of water in the county. Patricia's shriek when the judge read that last part could probably be heard from space. She actually fainted and had to be carried out of the courtroom on a stretcher, still muttering about community enrichment and property values as the doors closed behind her. In the end, my lake was restored to its peaceful state. The sand was hauled away, the structures demolished, and the HOA learned a hard lesson about boundaries. As for me, I spent my recovery sipping tea on my dock, watching the water ripple in silence, just the way it was meant to be.